Caught my husband cheating, now he's ghosting me and dodging his financial responsibilities. Hey Reddit. My husband, Mark, and I have been married for 6 years. We built a life together, shared bills, dreams, and responsibilities. We weren't perfect, but I thought we were solid. I truly believed we had something real, something worth fighting for. And then, just like that, it all crumbled in a way I never saw coming. It started with little things. Mark coming home later than usual. His phone always on silent. The way he'd suddenly be protective over it when, before, he didn't care if I used it to Google something or check the time. I told myself I was overthinking. Work was stressful for him, and maybe I was just being paranoid. But deep down, my gut knew. One night, he went out with some friends, or at least, that's what he told me. I had no reason to doubt him, but something gnawed at me. Maybe it was the way he rushed out the door, or how he barely acknowledged me before leaving. It didn't sit right. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I tracked his location using our shared family plan. He wasn't at the bar like he said he'd be. His location pinged at an address I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped. I sat there, staring at my phone, hoping it was some weird mistake. But the longer I waited, the harder it became to ignore the truth staring me in the face. I got in my car and drove there. Every second felt like a punch to the gut. I didn't know what I was going to do if I found something. I told myself I just needed to see it for myself, that I wouldn't make a scene. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw when I pulled up. Mark's car was in the driveway of a house I'd never seen before. And then, as if the universe wanted to slap me in the face with reality, he walked out the front door, with her. A woman I'd never met, laughing, holding onto his arm like she belonged there. Like I didn't exist. I didn't even think. I got out of the car and called his name. The way his face drained of color when he saw me was almost satisfying, but it didn't take away the sheer pain of it all. The woman beside him looked confused, then annoyed, like I was the one ruining their night. Mark didn't even have the decency to act guilty. He didn't stammer or try to explain. He just sighed, rubbed his face, and said, "What are you doing here?" Like I was the one in the wrong. I lost it. I demanded to know how long this had been going on, who she was, why he lied. And all he did was stand there, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Then, the woman, Hannah, I later found out, rolled her eyes and said, "You told me you were separated." That nearly knocked the wind out of me. Separated? We shared a home, a bed. We had bills with both our names on them. I turned to Mark, waiting for him to deny it, to say something. But he didn't. He just stood there, silent, as if letting her think we were separated was easier than admitting the truth. I don't remember everything I said after that, but I know I didn't hold back. I called him a liar, a coward, a pathetic excuse for a husband. Hannah looked uncomfortable, but she didn't leave. Mark, on the other hand, had the nerve to look annoyed, like I was embarrassing him. I left before I did something I'd regret. I got in my car and drove home, shaking with rage and betrayal. I thought he'd come after me. That he'd at least call, try to explain himself, even if it was just some pathetic excuse. But he didn't. And that's when the ghosting started. At first, I thought he was just giving me space. But days passed, and nothing. No calls. No texts. No apologies. I tried reaching out, demanding answers, but he ignored every message. When I tried calling, it went straight to voicemail. He was just gone. Except he wasn't. I saw him posting on social media, acting like his life was perfectly fine. As if I didn't exist. As if 6 years of marriage meant nothing. The real slap in the face came when the bills started piling up. We split everything, rent, utilities, groceries. But suddenly, he wasn't paying his share. His name was still on the lease, but he acted like it wasn't his problem. I was drowning in expenses, scrambling to cover everything on my own while he played house with Hannah. I tried contacting him again, this time about the bills, but he ignored me. I sent messages, emails, even reached out to mutual friends to get him to talk to me. But he had completely erased me from his life. That's when I knew this wasn't just about him cheating. He was trying to abandon all responsibility, to leave me stranded while he ran off into his new life without a second thought. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I started looking into legal options, calling a lawyer to see what my rights were. He couldn't just ghost me and expect me to handle everything on my own. But while I was preparing for that battle, something unexpected happened, something that changed everything. Because, as much as Mark thought he could just disappear and move on, karma had other plans. And it was about to hit him harder than he ever expected. Update. After realizing Mark was trying to ghost me completely, I knew I had to act fast. I wasn't about to let him walk away without consequences, especially not when he had financial obligations. I met with the lawyer and explained everything: how he abandoned our marriage, how he refused to answer my calls or messages, and most importantly, how he was still legally bound to our lease and bills. The lawyer assured me that Mark couldn't just disappear without repercussions. Since his name was on the lease, he was legally responsible for his share, and if he refused to pay, I had grounds to take legal action. That was all I needed to hear. But before I could even move forward with legal steps, I decided to try one last time to confront him. I found out where he was staying, surprise, surprise, with Hannah. So, I drove over there. My heart was pounding the entire way, but I knew I had to face him head on. I knocked on the door, fully expecting him to refuse to answer. But to my shock, it was Hannah who opened it. The moment she saw me, her face twisted into an annoyed glare. Before she could slam the door in my face, I stuck my foot in the way and said I needed to talk to Mark. She crossed her arms and told me he wasn't there, but I wasn't stupid. His car was parked right outside. I wasn't leaving until I got answers. After a long, tense stare down, she finally turned and called out for him. And when Mark finally appeared at the door, his expression was one of pure irritation. Like I was some inconvenience rather than his wife, the woman he abandoned. I didn't waste time. I told him flat out that he needed to pay his share of the bills, that he was legally responsible, and if he didn't, I would take him to court. Instead of reacting like a decent human being, he laughed. Actually laughed in my face. He told me he didn't owe me anything, that I needed to move on and stop being bitter. That was the moment I realized he truly felt no remorse. He thought he could just rewrite history, pretend like we were never together, and erase any responsibility he had. But he was wrong. I told him I was going to take legal action, that he wasn't going to get away with this. He just smirked and said, "Do whatever you want." Hannah was standing behind him, looking smug, and I could tell she thought I was just some desperate ex clinging to the past. That only fueled my anger. I left, but I wasn't defeated. If he wanted to act like this, I was going to make sure he regretted it. I immediately moved forward with legal proceedings. I filed to officially separate our finances, submitted proof that he had abandoned his responsibilities, and began the process of taking him to small claims court for the unpaid rent and bills. It was a slow process, but I refused to let him win. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I found out something that turned this entire situation on its head. Another update. While waiting for the legal process to move forward, I started digging into Mark's financials. We had shared a lot of things over the years, including some joint accounts and credit lines. Even though I had already separated most of my finances from his, I still had access to certain statements. And that's when I saw it, an unfamiliar charge for a hotel stay months before I caught him cheating. My heart started pounding. I clicked through more transactions and saw several expensive restaurant bills, gifts, and even a trip to a resort. None of which were for me. That's when it hit me: Mark hadn't just been cheating with Hannah. He had been cheating for a long time. Possibly with multiple women. That realization made me sick to my stomach. I had been so focused on the betrayal with Hannah that I didn't even consider the possibility that he had been living a double life for longer than I knew. I took screenshots of everything, every shady charge, every expensive outing that I knew I wasn't a part of. And then I did something that I knew would burn his world down: I sent them to Hannah. I found her social media, attached the evidence, and wrote, "Just in case you thought you were special." I expected her to block me, maybe call me crazy. But what happened next was even better. 2 days later, I got a message from Hannah. She was furious, not at me, but at Mark. She had confronted him, demanding answers, and he had tried to lie his way out of it. But the evidence was too strong. Turns out, she wasn't the only other woman. Mark had been seeing multiple women, lying to all of them, and juggling his affairs like some kind of manipulative sociopath. Hannah told me she kicked him out, blocked him, and was done with him for good. I didn't care much about her feelings, but knowing that Mark had just lost the person he abandoned me for? That was satisfying. But karma wasn't done with him yet. Final update. With Hannah kicking him out and the legal case moving forward, Mark was spiraling. He tried to ignore the legal proceedings at first, thinking I would back down. But when he got served with court documents, his arrogant attitude finally cracked. He messaged me for the first time since he ghosted me, acting all casual like, "Hey, can we talk?" I didn't respond. He sent a few more messages, some guilt-trippy ones about how we used to be good together and that I should let the past go. I ignored every single one. Then he tried to play the victim. He told mutual friends that I was ruining his life, that I was out for revenge and trying to destroy him. But no one bought his sob story, because by now, the truth was out. Everyone knew what he did. Everyone saw the evidence. He had no one left in his corner. When the court date finally arrived, he looked like a shadow of his former self. The smugness was gone. He tried to act like he was struggling, that he couldn't afford to pay what he owed, but the judge didn't care. The ruling was in my favor. He was ordered to pay his share of the rent and utilities, and if he didn't, I could legally go after his wages. He tried to argue, but it was useless. The law was on my side. But the best part? Right after the ruling, I found out he lost his job. Apparently, he had been slacking off at work, and his boss had enough. So now, not only was he broke and forced to pay me, but he also had no income. It was poetic justice. I walked out of that courtroom feeling lighter than I had in months. Mark had tried to ghost me, thinking he could avoid responsibility, thinking he could just start fresh without facing the consequences. But karma had other plans. He lost his wife, his home, his job, and the woman he cheated with, all because he thought he was untouchable. As for me, I've moved on. I no longer feel anger or pain when I think about him. If anything, I just feel relief. Because now, I'm free. And he's left with nothing but the mess he made.